Welcome to the Black Box App Podcast. I'm your host, Kenneth Johnson. Excited to be here today with a gentleman that I actually really admire. I met him maybe about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago. I can't remember, time's flying. But immediately once I met him, I knew I had to have him as a guest on the Black Box App Podcast. So I'm really happy today to have Omar Eaton Martinez with us today. Mr. Martinez is American Alliance of Museums Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, and Inclusion Senior Fellow. Yes, we're peeking into the museum space, man. They always tell me that Black men aren't represented in different spaces, and here we go to prove this theory wrong. Omar, welcome to the Black Box App Podcast, my friend.
Man, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this space, and I'm excited to have a great conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I wanted to touch in, I'm just kind of looking at some of my notes here, but I wanted to touch in on a very interesting career path of yours, right? You're an educator, right? You create curriculums, you've worked for NASA, like you've done all of this stuff. Walk us through kind of how you got to where you're at today.
Well, I started off, I always like to start off just like my journey in college. I started off as a psych major at University of Maryland, College Park. I thought I wanted to go into social services and be a social worker, and I did a couple internships. Were really great, experiences for me because I really like working with people and helping people, and really seeing the humanity in folks. But then I later on discovered really that I wanted to get into history and culture, and I changed my major to African American Studies, where I started to thrive a bit around doing some research around Afro-Latino identity, right? So my family's from Puerto Rico, and I have my own identity, sort of identity crisis coming up in the DC metropolitan area, where obviously I present Black because I am Black, but I'm not an African American in the context that we all understand what African American is, right? Like my descendants or my ancestors were enslaved, but they weren't enslaved on this land, on this particular land. And so when I started to do my own research, because my own meaning making around that identity was really socially constructed by my family. Like the four walls of my home were Puerto Rico, but outside of that, it was not. And so, but my parents had the means to be able to send me and my sister to Puerto Rico every summer. So I had a relationship with my family in Puerto Rico. I still do to this day. Nice. I was able to learn how to be fairly proficient in Spanish and understand Puerto Rican culture. But I never understood it academically. So when I became an African American Studies major and I was tasked to create the senior thesis paper, I decided to lean in on that as a scholar, and it opened up my world tremendously to not just my own lived experience, but really what scholarship has taught us around what it is to be Black in this country other than just African American. And then I went on and continued my work to do a master's in the same at Clark Atlanta University. And then I ended up going to New York and becoming a teacher because I know that I didn't want to be one of those professors, because I thought I was going to be in the academy. I didn't want to be one of those professors who wrote 12 books but didn't know how to teach, because I had experience with some of those professors and I didn't think that was what I wanted to be. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm walking through the streets of Brooklyn on Court Street and people are passing out flyers. And one of the flyers are like, well, if you're interested in teaching, all you need is a college degree. Come inside and we'll give you a job. So I decided to do that. I took them up on that challenge, and they looked at my transcripts and said, you know what? You're proficient in Spanish. You want to teach. Let's send you to Enrico Fermi, IS 111 in Bushwick, Brooklyn. And so that's where they sent me. And I started off my teaching career in IS 111 on Star Street near Knickerbocker. And I got my feet wet teaching. And I was not an education major. I never had any student teaching under my belt. And so they just threw me to the lions. And I taught sixth grade self-contained bilingual for 1 year at that school. It was a tremendous education. Then I went on to teach in the South Bronx at a place called Bronx Regional, which is basically an alternative high school where students who got kicked out or were dropped out and came back into the school system wanted to get their high school diploma as opposed to getting their GED. And so I did that for about 3.5 years and ended up my career there as the head of the social studies department. Then I left there and came back to the DC area where I worked at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center as an education outreach specialist. Where we worked on creating educational materials based on the sciences and the missions that we supported under the then called Summer Connection Program. And I got to do in-service workshops for teachers, pre-service workshops for teachers. We also did an informal education workshop, which I created. And then we ended up working with a beautiful relationship with the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, where we're able to bring in teachers from all over the United States and Puerto Rico and do a series of workshops, intense workshops around the sun, the earth, and its connection, and how to incorporate that in their curriculum. And then I did something similar for instead of K through 12 teachers, but with informal educators, which were basically museum folks, after school programs, and anything that was outside of the classroom. And then I also got to work on a documentary called Places of Mirrors, which it actually allows us to have all the science and those missions that we supported in conversation with indigenous culture.
Okay.
Indigenous cultures being the indigenous folks in Alaska around the Northern Lights, or what we call the Aurora Borealis. We also filmed a location in Guatemala to talk about the Mayan culture, what it said about the sun and the earth. And then we also went to Ireland and talked about ancient Gaelic culture. Ireland has some of the oldest ancient observatories in the world. They're actually even older than Stonehenge in England. And so we did all that together. So I worked on that contract for about 2 years. And then I went back to teaching in DC public schools, where I taught ESL students, or English language learner students, social studies at Columbia Heights Education Campus. And then I went on to become a park ranger at the National Park Service, where I worked on youth programs, as well as things that are focused around environmental justice. We did a program called the Anacostia Watershed Ambassador Youth Program. And then intermittently, I worked on a very special project that really kind of got me more deep into the museum world, which was the National Museum of the American Latino Commission. And so there was a commission that was legislated by President Bush, brought to life by President Obama, and they had 23 commissioners, and that legislation created an office to manage the affairs of those commissioners for the course of 2 years, where they were tasked to write a report on the feasibility of having a National Museum of the American Latino. And so as a park ranger, I worked intermittently in that office for the entirety of those 2 years to help support that great work. And so I was able to develop relationships with different museums across the nation, especially the Smithsonian, around how, what's the feasibility of actually having this national museum. We turned in that report the 5th of May, 2011.
Okay.
And of course, hopefully everybody knows by now, just about a year ago, almost today, it was signed into existence, where we're going to have this National Museum of the American Latino under the auspices of the Smithsonian. And I went on and worked for the Smithsonian at the National Museum of American History as a program manager, where I ran one of the largest intern and fellows programs in the institution. I really focused on diversity and inclusion and making sure that we were partnering with folks to cast a wider net, and I increased the diversity of our academic appointees, anywhere from my predecessor had about 20%. It never got lower than 33% for me per cycle, maybe as high as 50% in some
wow,
cycles.
That's impressive.
And it was great. It was a great entree to do that work. And then I went on to come to work, do the work I'm doing now, almost 4 years later, at the Maryland National Capital Parks and Planning Commission, where I run an aggregate of historic house museums, archaeological parks, an aviation museum, Black History program, and a brand new mobile museum that we'll be releasing in a few months.
So you've changed, actually, you've educated me on the variance between park rangers. I just never, every time I thought park ranger, I just thought guy in a brown suit, walking around, I don't know, like when I was in Philly, Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell area, just had information, but really kind of there to make sure that everything was going right. But man, you're doing instruction, you're leading programming. Like, that's amazing work.
Yeah, the park rangers, especially. I mean, the park rangers that we have we have park rangers in the agency I work with now. But the park rangers that I was part of with the National Park Service are really probably the most dynamic professionals in the federal government, I would argue. I mean,
Wow.
they kind of do everything from interp to law enforcement to program management to conservation to curation. I mean, those people do it all.
Man, that's great. You know, I was as I was listening to you speak about the different things that you've been involved in and things that you've kind of led, and it seems like it kind of brought a lot of the skills full circle for you. I know you mentioned psych to African American studies, and I would imagine that a lot of those disciplines came into play as you kind of navigated your way through those various systems.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was very much in handy for me to have my African American Studies degree. I'm always happy to go back to my alma mater and talk to students who are there, because that's always the biggest question. Like, what do you do with an African American Studies degree? So I was like, well, I got a few ideas for you. So we talked to the students about it, and it's a wonderful program because it's interdisciplinary program, and so you get to learn about history, sociology, political science, just all in the name of really uplifting the African American experience, and really in some cases the Afro diasporic experience here in the United States.
You know, and it's been a long time, and I don't remember a lot of people's names, but when I was at the University of Maryland at College Park, I was part of a program where they assigned us an African American counselor as well. And his name was Otis. I cannot think of his last name.
Otis Williams.
There you
Otis
go.
Williams.
There you go, Otis Williams. And he encouraged me to take a lot of the African American studies courses. I ended up in, a jazz course, an African American history course. Like, he was the one that kind of led me in that direction, because I came from a PWI high school, right? And I didn't know much about, I didn't even know, when I got to Maryland, I didn't even know they had an African American studies program until I saw the course curriculum, and I still kind of just leafed over it. But in sitting down with Otis and filling out my schedule, he had me in those classes, man, like my second day on campus. We've been rolling, but great guy. So you are familiar.
Otis Williams, yes. He was the founder of the Numburu Cultural Center, which is an iconic space for Black people, University of Maryland. Proud to say he's a fraternity brother of mine, Phi Beta Sigma.
Okay.
He was iconic. We just had an anniversary for Numburu recently, and we took the time to honor him. And right before I graduated, they built a new cultural center that was attached to the Stamp Student Union. And it's a beautiful space and has a beautiful mural of Otis, like a whole wall. It's just him. It's beautiful. But he helped so many students. And actually, that course that you took, I took the jazz course, and I took the blues course. When I was a teacher in New York City, here's a kid from Silver Spring and teaching kids about hip hop in the South Bronx.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I took that format, and if you remember, it was jazz or blues as a cultural art form. Mm-hmm. So I created a course as an elective called hip hop as a cultural art form.
There you go.
So here's this kid from Silver Spring teaching these kids from the Bronx River the birthplace of hip hop about hip hop. So it was a great experience for me.
Man, it was crazy. We did presentations for our finals and everything. It was very interactive experience, man. And it was Otis that talked me into experiencing that. And at some levels, really changed my life. There's certain things you don't think about until you start speaking about it. But the work I do as a diversity recruiter may be related to those experiences, and him putting his arm around me and saying, hey, son, why don't you look in this direction as well? So that's my University of Maryland story. That's Otis. I'm glad, man, that's amazing. Anyway, I could talk about that for the rest of this podcast, but I won't. I'd like for you, you walked us through the career journey, right? And I know through that, man, you've worked with students, you've led teams, you've kind of been an independent, I would imagine, in some of your leadership as well. So I really would like to lean on you for people that are listening to the Black Box app podcast for our audience at all career levels. What's your advice for people at the entry level career stage, mid-manager stage, and also senior level as it relates to how they should navigate their spaces as diverse candidates or diverse employees, should I say?
I love the way that you asked the question in terms of, the division between emerging, mid and I guess more seasoned individuals. I mean, for me, the emerging is to really be able to start your professional vision now. The professional vision, I would always coach the interns that I work with and other younger folks in the field, is that you have to have a professional vision for yourself. And if you can state that vision, if you can articulate that vision, then when you meet people who might be more seasoned or might know more about the field than you do, then it gives them an idea of how they can help you and help you think more expansively about how your skill sets are valuable in this sector. Because one of the things that happens with a lot of younger folks is that they think very linearly about the skill sets that they've attained. They think very linearly about the degrees they just earned. And there's always your skill sets, whether they're soft or hard, are always transferable across sectors. And I always find that in the exam field, you have some of the most dynamic professionals. There's certainly some people that have gone from A to Z in terms of the very beginning of their career and worked just in museums and cultural institutions. But really, I find a lot of people who are like me, who jumped around from, working with different types of agencies and working in K through 12 and then coming into this field later or sort of mid-career and being able to really still make a mark because those skills are transferable. And the museum field is just so diverse in the types of professionals that it needs. So I would really have people think about their professional vision and start to be able to articulate that, and then be able to start to identify people to speak with and build a network of mentors, not just one mentor, but a network of mentors, really to really leaning on the idea that the skill sets that you have will cover so much different ground. No one mentor can probably be that person for you. You'll need a group of people to provide that for you. And hopefully, if they're a diverse group of a network of mentors, it'll help you understand different perspectives as well. And then identify professional associations you can start being active in. I think the mistake younger folks make also is that they want to wait to their 2 or 3 years and then join a professional association when you should be joining it from the beginning, because if you do join it from the beginning, it'll help drive those next 2 or 3 years.
Sure.
And then for
relationship building is top of mind, because those people have similar interests and have maybe had the experiences that you're getting ready to have, especially if it's a professional network, right? You see, like SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Managers, they're on campuses, like they have campus chapters, so why wait to get involved in that when you're working in a position or with a corporation when you could have been involved on campus?
Absolutely. And I mean, when you're mid-career, I mean, I think this is where most of us spend most of our life, right? I mean, sort of mid-career, if you think about how time works. I mean, you're mid-career most of your career, right? And so, mid-career for me is not just mentoring, but being mentored still. And I think it's really, for me, and maybe I'm biased because I'm mid-career right now, but, it's the most exciting time because I can still receive mentorship and still give it, and then have those two relationships really inform one another. So I feel like this is the time where I'm really being mostly informed about how I move forward in my career more than any other time of my career, because I'm helping people out, I'm being helped, and those two relationships are informing one another. And I think for me, it's just an exciting time. And of course, if you're a seasoned, I mean, for me, I always view myself as I approach that part of my career to always lean in on helping other people. I mean, I'm happy when people reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to meet emergent or mid-career professionals at conferences or by references from other people that I know. I'm always happy to talk to people about that because some people did that for me, and I think it's important to pay it forward.
For sure. I have to ask you this question. It just came about. So during the pandemic, just based on the spaces that you work in, I mean, everyone was impacted, right? But man, you probably really had to shift some of your programming to just adapt in that environment. Am I correct?
Oh, absolutely. And new skill sets were starting to be privileged and valued, right? Because, where certain contexts, people weren't really doing, live streaming and recording things like that. And, I think it really allowed us to grow in a wonderful way. I mean, all for the wrong reasons, right? I mean,
Right.
nobody wants a pandemic to have that realization, but I mean, I just remember, entering in this position back in the May of 2018 and looking at that as an opportunity. And it was a little difficult to have conversations with my direct reports about some of these things because for some of them it was such a heavy lift. And then there also it wasn't just a competency issue, but it was also like a resource issue. Like we don't have A, B, and C. We have to outsource everything. We have to go through these different hoops. And I work for a very complex agency, which kind of makes things harder sometimes. But because of this situation, we've all had to become much more flexible and much more, much more open to being able to do those things and really participate in the global pivot towards virtual programming and virtual immersive experiences. And now sort of this hybrid that we've started to come up with over the last year and a half. And for me, it's really allowed us to realize the value of our assets because once we started going virtual, instead of getting 150 people at a program, now we have access to 4,000 people across the United States, like almost in a blink of an eye.
Sure.
And once we understood that, then it really started to help create value for who we are and what we have as an agency.
What advice do you have for individuals that may possess some skill sets? Actually, like you said, it's across the board from a skill set standpoint, but may possess interest in exploring careers, in that park system?
Oh, I mean, there's so many things you can do working in Parks and Rec or working in the National Park Service or for the Smithsonian or really for museums writ large. I mean, you have the ability to, people usually think about museums, they think about curators, or you can think about people who are doing education, who are organizing public programs, who are doing special events. One of the more undertold skill sets in this arena are people who fundraise and raise money. That is a skill set. That's a skill set you can take almost anywhere. Even if you are going into the corporate world, you have people who do CSR, corporate social responsibility, and so you could be a grant maker or someone who supports this type of work. So the sky's the limit. I think really leaning in on our professional associations is a great start. Going to the Association of African American Museums, going to the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, going to the American Association for State and Local History, going to the American Alliance of Museums. All these are great organizations that are eager for professionals to learn about their work, especially people of color.
When we were at the back in December, I think it was, when we were at the Robert E. Smith Museum in Baltimore, when you took the podium and you were using a great tech tool, by the way, I might add, to make people inclusive within the room. But you mentioned, wow, we need some grant writers in the room, because when people were listing their occupations, you had mentioned that as well. So I remember that, and I see that's front facing for you, but it makes complete sense.
Absolutely, we need it. And we were at the Reginald F. Lewis Museum in Baltimore.
Reginald F. Lewis, I'm sorry, yes.
And it was, and I'm glad we were able to do that and use that tool. It helps people know who's in the room, and that event that Kenneth is talking about is something that we use to really build community around our work. And so it's hard to build community when you don't know each other. And I'm glad that we were able to notify and identify that gap, that we didn't have any grant makers or fundraisers in the room, and they play such an important role in the work that we do.
Yeah, that was an amazing opportunity. Met a lot of great people there. I know you guys are doing great work, and sometimes I believe that it goes somewhat unnoticed, especially on that Association of African American Museum side. I think I've had the pleasure of visiting some of the museums that fall under that umbrella, but I've also been in cities and haven't paid any attention to others, and I need to get better at that. So thank you for the work that you're doing in that space. I really appreciate it.
Amen. No, thank you. It's been a pleasure to support that work, and I'm looking forward to supporting it more in the future.
For sure. Listen, thank you for coming out today. I'd like for you to share with our audience how they can stay connected to the work that you're doing and connected to you.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you could always follow me on Twitter at O Eaton Martinez, on Instagram at Eaton Martinez to see what I'm up to. Certainly working at PG Parks and Rec. We have our PG Parks History Facebook page, which talks about all of our latest events. And we do a lot of just interpretive posts just to teach you about the history. So you don't even have to come to our site. You can go on our Facebook history, PG Parks History Facebook page and learn. And so those are some of the ways you can keep in contact with me.
Well, we definitely will do that. And one more question for you before we go. If you've had an opportunity to take a look at the Black Box app and you just can kind of position it for value, what do you see the value in a tool like that for individuals at all career stages?
Well, I think anytime you get an opportunity to use an app like that helps you engage with professionals, I mean, it's so unique. It's such a unique opportunity, such a unique service. And I really encourage people to look at it and to get involved and to get connected. We got to be connected and we got to serve each other. We got to, I mean, we have this opportunity now through Black Box and social media to really connect with one another, to really get to know each other's work, and to really lift up the Black voice in all of our professional sectors. So I really encourage you guys to dig in.
Omar Eaton Martinez, American Alliance of Museums. Thank you so very much, sir, for visiting the Black Box Act podcast. See you soon.
I appreciate it. And coming soon, you'll see a podcast of my own called The Museum Jedi. And so if you follow me on the socials, I have more information coming for you in the next couple of weeks.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to that. So I'll definitely stop by there as well and support you. Thank you for visiting us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.